We never know where life will lead us or what may hinder us along the way. But while every day can feel like one big question mark, it doesn't have to. With the right insights, strategies, and solutions from Western and Southern Financial Group, together we can look ahead to leave the unknown behind.
All right, Mike, we have to address the elephant in the room. If you're watching on YouTube, you have Coors Edge. Tell the people who didn't listen to the Monday podcast episode why we have Coors Edge on the table.
Yeah, I'm doing dry January, and I just wanted to try them just to see because...
So Coors Edge is their non-alcoholic brew.
the non-alcoholic version. It says less than 0.5% by volume. You go to, you don't notice them at a liquor store, but there's... a ton of brands have zero alcohol beers now, like Heineken, Bud. And so we're trying to Coors Edge. I don't know who buys these besides, I don't know, maybe recovering alcoholics is probably the only people I can think of, but we'll crack them and see how they taste. Yeah, let's see.
Double brewed for a refreshing taste. And they're twist-offs. I think you have to expect that from a non-alcoholic beer.
Yeah.
Quinn also got one well. Producer Quinn, you're rocking the Coors Edge tonight.
Yeah, it pairs really well with my UDF coffee that I got here at 7 in the morning. That
it
might
is 7
be my
a.m.
Yeah, it is 7 a.m. That's true. That's true. I said tonight because it felt like it's tonight, but it's actually 7 a.m. Let me get a little sip here.
Cheers.
I mean, it tastes like a Coors.
It actually does taste like a Coors.
See, here's the thing though. Coors tastes like ass.
No, okay,
and if I'm drinking Coors, I'd like to be getting a buzz, not just drinking it for fun.
I don't know. I don't mind
41
it.
calories, 8 carbs, Coors Edge.
Yeah.
Dry January just became a lot easier. All right, let's get into this. We have to start the podcast with this. You sent me and Quinn this screenshot in our group message last night. Trey Lance on Liv Cowherd's Instagram. I don't think, here's what I'll say, was not shooting his shot. Looked like a follow-up conversation. You know, he said in the comment, doesn't look like you are in New York City or something along those lines, right?
Yeah.
You're not in New York City, are you? Do you have the comment in front of you?
I do not actually.
I got it. I'll pull it up
on
right
our
here.
most recent post.
I have it right here. Don't lie, you're not in NYC. I feel like that sounds like a follow-up where they had some history.
It was some game. He was spitting a little game at her. It wasn't like it wasn't just like the hard eyes emoji or something basic on an Instagram post. It was actually, he was trying to get a response is what he was doing.
I like the play out of Trey Lance, honestly.
And if you would have told me that Justin Herbert would have had the girlfriend he has now back in the draft process, that would have changed my mind a little bit. So Trey Lance making plays like that, he's moving up the board.
Stock is coming up.
Confidence matters at the quarterback position.
Absolutely. I think confidence does matter. And when you're shooting your shot with Liv Cowherd, it's called a power move. All right. The other thing we got to bring up, probably more realistic, is the Nick Caserio hire for the Houston Texans. I don't have a significant opinion on Caserio. I think it's very difficult to have opinion on GM candidates without knowing them personally or knowing the decisions they've made.
That's the thing. Everyone's from the outside going to criticize, Patriots guys haven't worked out at other places. You have no fucking clue what this guy's done.
Yeah, exactly.
Inside the Patriots organization, it's impossible to know. And especially
you can be he has this background or this background, he went to this school, but at a certain point, you don't know what the hell this guy's been doing with the Patriots or the type of person he is and the type whatever he's going to do.
Yeah, this isn't like a coaching hire where you can see the schemes they've ran or even the people they've learned from under coaching-wise. You have no clue how he wants to run an organization or what maybe they didn't use any of his, they drafted like shit the Patriots past 5 or 6 years. Maybe they didn't use any of his takes. Maybe he was super high on guys that they didn't draft. You just don't know unless you're inside that building. So if you're going to criticize...
Guys just banging the table for all these guys and they're never picking them and everyone's like, Nick Caserio seems pretty sick. But I think what you can have a take on is the fact that the Houston Texans paid hundreds of thousands of dollars to that search firm, and then they give him 5 dudes, 5 candidates, and at Easterby ends up going for one of the guys they didn't pick up, wasting that hundreds of thousands.
On one hand, I love that they didn't go with search firm because these search firms are a joke too. What, like they can't know either. There's
true.
It's just checking a box. It's just trying to look good as an owner, saying you did all your due diligence on that. So I like that from one perspective, that you just went out and got your guys still, even though disregard what the search firm said. But I didn't like it from the fact that it still means Jack Easterby is basically running the show there. And everyone read the article at this point. I hope if you haven't, was it Ty Dunn wrote it about the inner workings of that organization? No, who wrote the article?
I don't remember.
Okay, well, I should look that up and find out who wrote it. But it was a great article just talking about how basically he has been running the show from behind the scenes and picking favorites within that organization, and is still basically running the show even without Bill O'Brien there.
One name I do like in the GM conversation right now who's getting interviews is Kwesi Adofo-Mensah. And I don't know him personally. I don't know the decisions he's made with the San Francisco 49ers. But what I do know, he was the director of research and development for them for the past 5 years, and is close friends or has worked with and talked to George Chahuri and Eric Eager, our two research and development, our two data scientists here. And they have really, really high praise for his mathematical background. And anytime you see some of those guys going in, it's not so much about the decisions he's going to make in that GM position and the research he's going to continue to do. But if Kwesi does get a GM position, it's about the people he'll surround himself with, adding more guys with mathematical backgrounds that have invested time in the analytics and understand where the NFL is going from a positional value perspective, how to spend cap resource, all that stuff. I think Kwesi is a name to look for, that if your team is interviewing that candidate, he'd be one of my favorites. He's not as experienced, but he is an older candidate too. I think he's close to 40 years old, so something there to look out for. And I have a take as well.
Jenny Varentis and Greg Bishop, to give credit to where credit is due for that. If you haven't read it, go read that article about Jack.
Who wrote for what?
On Sports Illustrated.
Sports Illustrated. I have a take too. All these people, all these fans and media are speculating who's the best coaching candidate for my team or this team, whoever it may be. I also, similar to GM, don't think you can actually know who good coaches are going to be. You can say, I like the schemes they've run. You could say you like the plays they've called, and from the sideline see the type of persona they have and hear what players say about them, all that stuff. But being a head coach is completely different than being a coordinator. You have to understand their management style, how they'd act trying to lead a football team. I think, not a perfect example, but an example is Freddie Kitchens made some moves offensively as an offense coordinator, was put in a position to be the head coach, and really, really struggled to manage that football team. And I think Robert Saleh, from what I've known about him, watching him on TV and hearing players talk about him, is probably a fantastic leader. He runs the stairs before every game, but I don't know him personally. Similar to Brian Daboll, love what he's done in Buffalo from a play calling perspective, how he's groomed Josh Allen. But can he manage a full staff of coaches and manage a team? I don't fucking know. I still think that the speculation is I really like this guy's offense, I really like this guy's defense, or their sideline antics, or how they present themselves. But at a certain point, you don't really know how they're going to be as managers, because it's a completely different role
Mark Trestman
than as a coordinator.
When it was just a disaster. Yes, on one hand, I will say that's probably true for 90-ish% of candidates. But I think everyone knew Kyle Shanahan was going to be a pretty damn good head coach. There are guys that you are okay, he's going to be
What's your opinion of Saleh?
Damn good.
I think a lot of people think he's going to be a damn good coach.
I think he will be as well. I think he runs their defense has just exceeded expectations continually over his tenure there. So I do think there are certain guys that you can tell, and there are certain guys on the opposite end who have maybe had their chances or done things where you're just I don't think that's going to work. We'll get to one of those later when we get to the least worst coach of the year award.
All right, now Devonta Smith last night won the Heisman.
He did.
We had him picked as our Heisman, I believe, or you had him picked and I had him picked as our Heisman for
Tresh
PFF.
Picked Mac Jones like a
loser.
Just mark.
No, not a mark. No. But Devonta Smith wins the Heisman, deservedly so. I mean, he had insane production. I think the highest PFF receiving grade we've ever seen from a wide receiver at the collegiate level.
It goes back to the spirit of the Heisman Award, and I love it because it had, since I believe Desmond Howard was Desmond Howard's last wide receiver, Charles Woodson the last non-quarterback or running back to win the award. It goes back to the spirit of best player, which was the Heisman. And he was, compared to the other wide receivers around college football, besides the guy in his own team who outproduced him in the 4 games that they were together, he was the best wide receiver in college football by far and away. Devonta Smith, it was not close this year. And so I think it goes back to that spirit of the award of he was, compared to his position, so far and away better. And even to like seasons we've seen in years past from the wide receiver position that you had to go him. Like Mac Jones, Kyle Trask, similar numbers. Trevor Lawrence, probably just like in terms of on-field performance, week in, week out, would have gotten my nod. But at the wide receiver position, no one held a candle to Devonta Smith. And that's why I thought Chase Young should have realistically been in the running last year, and was, obviously. But if Joe Burrow didn't exist, I thought it should have gone to Chase Young. I think that should be the spirit of the Heisman Award, not just, the quarterback of the best team.
All right, before we dive into the awards we listed out here, I have two things to mention. I got feedback on the previous podcast. I'm continuing to talk very, very fast. I'm going to slow down here. We're going to slow down on this episode and episodes 4. 2, someone called me out really, really well and said, you can't say...
For dressing?
Not dressing. Okay. Not dressing. Everyone hates my outfits. That's going to be a constant. You can't say Ja'Marr Chase is obviously, and emphasize obviously, the better prospect than Devonta Smith, and be the guy who preaches you can't be overconfident in your evaluation. And I agree with that.
Did we say obviously?
I think I did say obviously.
Yeah, I mean,
but with Ja'Marr, I think Ja'Marr Chase is a better prospect than Devonta Smith, but you can't be overconfident in your evaluation, and there's a lot of opportunity for Devonta Smith to be a more productive receiver in the NFL. I tweeted this out yesterday and received some feedback on whatever. You know, draft evaluation is largely overrated. I think it matters, and you need to be an evaluator, and you need to evaluate talent. But it is in a lot of ways overrated at this point, where it's gone, where players are always the ones that bust. It's never the team's fault. It's never that he wasn't in the right situation or with the right usage. It's always that the player just sucked. And looking at like the consensus board last year, how no one had Justin Jefferson over Judy Lamb or Ruggs, and Rager and those guys being as high as they were, I do feel like where draft evaluation is right now is overrated. And for those reasons, it's another reason why you can't be overconfident in your evaluation. You need to spend more time, I think, thinking about how you're going to use this player, how you're going to develop this player both on and off the field, rather than thinking like, who's the best prospect? Let's bring him in.
I think a board is overrated, I'll say. The ranking of 1 to 100, positional in a vacuum, like the outsiders boards are overrated. I don't think that the evaluation itself is, like, I think the more important thing is like cutting to the core of who a guy is and actually being able to describe his skill set so that they don't go to a bad situation. So you're not drafting a square peg for a round hole, and all of a sudden 4 years later, that guy looks really good in a different scheme. I think that's the more important thing, is actually understanding who the guy is. And then us from outsiders, I think that's like the thing I take the most pride in my job, is actually being able to tell you what this guy is and what his strengths and weaknesses are, not necessarily exactly how good he'll be. Yeah. Because that is, like you said, determined so much, and the perception of them is determined so much by where they go to. And also, it's been 1 year, these guys. I'm not going to write anyone off one way or the other. Obviously, if a guy's very, very good as a rookie, that's probably who he's going to be, but I'm not going to write a guy off just because he's not been at that level yet.
But I also think from a content perspective, evaluating talent dominates the conversation in terms of who's the best receiver in this class, who's number 2, who's number 3. And it's because that is more fun, and because fans can flock to that easier than saying, debate. All of these receivers are very good, and in the right situations, they'd probably be pretty damn good. Like you can look at Justin Jefferson in the situation he was in, and he performed exceeded expectations, broke the rookie receiving yards record. But I don't think he has that same production with the Eagles. And in 16 games, the Eagles, I think people are saying, "Oh man, he's a bust." I guarantee it. Like I guarantee it, playing with Carson Wentz and how they've used their receivers this year.
Oh yeah.
I think people will be talking about Justin Jefferson as a bust the same way they're talking about Rager. And I think that, in my opinion, needs to be more of a part of the conversation.
I mean, Rager is one of those where I think I tweeted the other day, Tua looks bad because Joe Burrow and Justin Herbert look so good. If those guys were also playing like shit, no one would be upset about the Tua pick, right now.
Yeah, true.
No, like everyone would just be like, okay, give him another year. Like, let's see how he looks next year. It's just because those guys look so good. It's only because Justin Jefferson was the very next pick and looks so good that you think Jalen Rager sucks. No, he has reasons to be very encouraged about what he did this year. He had 2 of the lowest, like Carson Wentz was the 5th lowest grade quarterback. Jalen Hurts had a lower passing grade than Carson Wentz. They just didn't have a lot going for him that year, and he had injuries as well. Like I'm not writing a guy off by any means.
Yeah, I don't think, regardless, we've said this multiple times, but never write a player off after their first season, especially after the COVID season, where players are battling injuries. There's no preseason for these rookies, all that stuff.
Look at what happened to Nelson Aguilar.
Yeah, Nelson Aguilar is a star now.
Leaves Philly.
Derek Carr in his postseason presser said, "Pay the man." I think he's going to get a pretty decent contract, but I think he's going to test the open market. There's no way he lets Las Vegas lowball him on an before he tests the market. In my opinion, I think teams will flock to him on the open market. All right, let's jump into these awards here, starting with Offensive Rookie of the Year and Defensive Rookie of the Year. We ranked these here. We had 3 guys mentioned. I wanted to be different. I think how you have it listed is very good. I wanted to be different and choose some different guys, but go ahead and give me your 3 for Offensive Rookie of the Year.
My number 1, Offensive Rookie of the Year, Tristan Wirfs.
Nice.
I think his
friend
season,
of the pod,
compared to expectations at that position, was the single most special season. I just think it was. He was exceptional, the second highest graded right tackle in the NFL. I think the 11th highest graded tackle overall in the NFL. That as a rookie is like Justin Jefferson graded higher at his position, but I think rookie wide receivers can hit the ground running, and he was in a situation where they really only used 2 wide receivers in that offense. So one of those 2 guys, the 2 guys were going to produce. So I just think Tristan Wirfs in the NFC South against the competition he had to face week in and week out from the edge, except for when he faced Atlanta, was ridiculously impressive. That's why he's my Offensive Rookie of the Year. And then I went Justin Herbert 2, Justin Jefferson 3.
I honestly think that's a very good take about how the Minnesota Vikings only really used 2 wide receivers in that offense. They stayed away from using a slot receiver there, and I mean, he's going to produce in that offense. So I do think that Tristan Wirfs at 1 is you can go to bat for that, and then Justin Herbert 2 is good. But I have here Justin Jefferson at 1, here in the second best rookie receiving grade we've ever seen at the position, 90.5 PFF receiving grade. Odell Beckham Jr. in 2014 earned a 90.6 PFF receiving grade, literally splitting hairs at that point. Justin Jefferson.
This is very scientific, Austin. That's not splitting hairs. That's
Justin Jefferson, statistically, if you look at purely receiving yards, had the best rookie season we've ever seen in the NFL, but he had the second best according to PFF receiving grade since 2006. And then after him, I had Tristan Wirfs and then Justin Herbert. And it's, people are going to look at this as Justin Herbert slander. Absolutely not. Justin Herbert was the highest graded quarterback in the NFL this year when under pressure. One of the highest graded quarterbacks on third down, and one of the highest graded quarterbacks throwing the ball deep. All 3 of those situations, while impressive, very volatile when looking at predicting future quarterback performance. Justin Herbert is, and I think Sam and Steve said this on the NFL podcast, and I agree completely. Justin Herbert is going to regress a little bit in those areas. In those areas, that's key. And on third downs, on under pressure, all those things. Where he's going to get better and where he showed signs of life is from a clean pocket, and accuracy is going to get better for Justin Herbert than what he was this year. That's where he's going to get better, especially as that situation improves, as the coaching staff improves, etc. I think you're going to see a little bit of a drop-off in play under pressure and then an increase just in development and a new coaching staff in the clean pocket areas to where Justin Herbert is, and I think you can confidently say this, one of the more impressive young quarterbacks in the NFL right now. And I think he can be that guy on a rookie contract if the Chargers figure their shit out from a coaching perspective and injuries perspective defensively.
That's the biggest
thing. Could be a legitimate team in the AFC.
I am very intrigued to see who they're going to get at head coach, because it should be a coveted job. Like, this should be a job that with the guy, when you have a guy like that at quarterback, a lot of teams should be beating out on the door for. But the interesting thing was that should have been the Browns a couple years ago. They hired Freddie Kitchens. So we'll see what they do.
You don't know who they are until they step into that management role, and they have to have those. Well, the scene that always comes to mind for me is in Hard Knocks when Hugh Jackson was sitting at the table and talking to all those guys. So pretend Hugh Jackson was the best play caller we've ever seen. You have a management style like that. I don't care if you're calling plays that scored 20. You get 20 yards of play. Like, if you're managing people like how Hugh Jackson did, you're not going to have buy-in from your coaches. You're not going to have buy-in from your players. I think, who tweeted this?
Todd Haley
was
like,
agree.
Todd Haley was basically running the show. He was sunning him in that room. He was like taking over.
It's bad.
You can't have that.
I think All22 or Betts tweeted this, and I couldn't agree more. Is that every good coach in the NFL, regardless of scheme or whatever, has buy-in. And if you don't have buy-in from the coaches and the players, because whether you're not a good cultural fit, you don't present yourselves well, you sound like an idiot, like maybe Hugh Jackson did a couple times, then I think you're going to really struggle. And I think you can't determine based off some of these guys' play calling on the sidelines which guys are going to really get buy-in from their players and coaches. And the first way to do it is win a ton of football games. But not every time can you do that with the roster you have, etc. Mm-hmm. The other way you do it is establishing a culture and establishing respect with your coaches and players. So it'll be interesting to see who does step into that Charger situation. I've been very vocal about wanting them to get Brian Daboll. I think Brian Daboll makes a ton of sense there to groom Justin Herbert. Another person said he should go to Jacksonville and groom Trevor Lawrence. I like that too. But what he did with Josh Allen this year, I think is Josh Allen and Justin Herbert have very similar skill sets, in my opinion. I think him going to Buffalo would be an encouraging thing.
I want Urban in Jacksonville.
Urban will be fun in Jacksonville as well. All right, defensive rookie of the year. Give me your guys.
My guys, number one, this one, obvious. Chase Young, 40 pressures, 24 run stops. He was just easily the best rookie. Number two, I'm going to go Jeremy Chin to play as well as he did in a kind of hybrid, versatile role. Was impressive. 30 stops in the season. And then number three, L'Jarius Sneed, one of the biggest dark horses in this rookie class in terms of where he came from. A 4th-round pick, played safety last year at LA Tech. 53.4 passer rating allowed as a rookie. He was the best rookie corner. I'm going to give an honorable mention, though, to Cam Curl for the Washington football team as well. He was damn good. I think the reason he's not getting Jeremy Chin-esque hype is because, one, he's not nearly as athletic, and two, he was a 7th-round pick, but that's your starting safety going forward. That's a quality starting safety from what we saw from him this year. And he was no slouch himself last year at Arkansas. He was very good, graded out really well, and has a lot of prototypical safety traits in terms of his size and his length. So I'm a fan of him.
Yeah, I actually picked Cameron Curl ahead of Jeremy Chin on my list. I went Chase Young as defensive rookie of the year, same as you. I think that's obvious. Highest graded player, highest graded rookie on the defensive side of the ball, and it wasn't even close. Then I went L'Jarius Sneed, and then Cameron Curl is number 3, and here's why. Cameron Curl only played 763 defensive snaps this year. Jeremy Chin at 967. Jeremy Chin missed 19 tackles. Cameron Curl missed 16, and Cameron Curl beat him out in defensive stops and interceptions total. Ended up grading better than Jeremy Chin. I think the missed tackles are going to drag down Jeremy Chin's grade, not unfairly. Missed tackles matter, but he was everywhere for that defense, like you said. And I think both those players are very, very good. I think, again, it's in a situation where you're splitting hairs between Cameron Curl and Jeremy Chin. I'm going to go with the guy that has graded better, finished with more defensive stops despite playing with fewer defensive snaps.
Go with it.
He is their starting safety. And I agree with it. He also had a really nice interception against the Philadelphia Eagles, I thought. He was playing outside corner there. I think Cameron Curl is legit, nice. And I think fell in the draft process for
Zach Ertz that he just stuffed at the line of scrimmage.
What'd you say?
It was Zach Ertz, right? That he just stuffed at the line of scrimmage and then picked it off. That's what you need from a safety. If a safety can do that, that's a W in today's NFL.
Is Zach Ertz overrated, or is he properly rated at this point? This might have been his last season in Philadelphia, right? And now he's going to be a free agent.
He's just not close to. Everyone wanted to put him in the tier with Kelsey and Kittle. He's not.
He's just not the athlete, right? Yeah. He's closer to Jason Witten than he is to Travis Kelce.
More prime Witten, which is still not that great.
Not Witten currently, not Booth Witten, but prime Witten. He's closer to prime Witten.
Witten's not in the booth though. Witten played this year and it was not good.
No. Jason Witten looks terrible this year.
He could be in our LVP conversation.
But Mike, you can't quantify the presence and the character he brought to the locker room. You can't.
He has buy-in.
Exactly. So I don't know what your problem is.
He was probably selling literal MLM products in that locker room.
The hell's an MLM product?
Multi-level marketing.
Oh, like a pyramid scheme?
Yeah.
I don't think I've never heard of MLM. All right, let's jump now to the MVP of the league. This one should be quick. I think this one's obvious. I think there's a conversation to be had about Patrick Mahomes. I think there is a conversation to be had. I think either Kevin Cole or Timo Risque wrote about how Patrick Mahomes has still been the best player in the NFL. But I think if you had to give the award to someone, I think Aaron Rodgers does make the most sense.
Yes. Okay, so I wanted to have this conversation. So in baseball, there's a stat card called WAR, and there's a stat called WPA, which is win percentage added. I think Aaron Rodgers had the most WAR, which I think would be value, like in terms of just value added over the course of the season. But a lot of those came in just blowouts where they were up by like 30 in the third quarter, and he was just trouncing teams. Like he added the most value in some games like that, and then they lost some close ones. Patrick Mahomes had the highest win percentage added because he was when crunch time in a lot of close games, he played extremely well. That's why they went 14-1 when he was a starter. He won more games. But I think in terms of just total value added, if that's the spirit of the award, I think Rodgers added more value. So I'm going to give him Yeah.
He's also going to win it. I think Bovada and different betting places have him as like the obvious favorite, almost where he can't lose. So Aaron Rodgers, congratulations early on your MVP award and hopefully a Super Bowl. Devonta Adams was on the Chris Collinsworth podcast, with Richard Sherman, and he talked about trying to win a Super Bowl this year. He talked about in detail too, route running and going against guys like Richard Sherman. It's a very good episode. I would definitely tune into the Chris Collinsworth podcast. But also, David Bakhtiari talked about the injury. He said, David Bakhtiari is this big jokester. And, he goes down and it's like just a weird step in practice. And everyone thinks he's joking. Like, oh, man. Because he's like, David Bakhtiari is the type of guy who takes it too far sometimes. Yeah. And then he wasn't joking and it was brutal. But he said, Devonta Adams asked Bakhtiari, like, is there anything I could do? And he's like, win a Super Bowl, dude. You win a Super Bowl for me. So some heartfelt stuff on the 2-for-1 Draft Pod today. But David Bakhtiari, literally the best pass protecting offensive tackle in the NFL.
Yeah.
Goes down for the Green Bay Packers. It's going to be interesting how they mitigate that. I think it's going to be Rodgers.
I wish we could have had grades on Bakhtiari. He was before our time, obviously, at PFF, but just to see how he would have done.
Where'd he go to school?
Colorado, 4th rounder, super undersized coming out. I think he was like 295. Obviously, completely remade his body once he got to the NFL. Now he's one of the best pass protectors. I just wanted to see, like, was he good in college still? Like, why did he fall the 4th round? That's right there.
But also, Dave Bakhtiari, I've heard, is a big Settlers of Catan guy.
Ooh.
He's like he's the set master in the Green Bay Packers locker room. I'd be interested to play him in some Catan as well. If you don't play Settlers of Catan, by the way, it sounds like a nerdy ass game. I will stand by this.
It is.
It is a nerdy ass game. Okay, it is a nerdy ass game, but I don't like board games because all board games you play, outside of like maybe Risk and maybe chess, are so predicated on probabilities and luck.
Yeah.
Like Monopoly is a joke. If you play that for fun, you should be 5 or younger. Same with Sorry. Same with any of those dumbass games. Trouble. Like you're just like really rolling a dice and seeing who wins. Catan is so much more based on strategy and all that stuff to where you could actually play and have a good time.
Risk is based on strategy.
No, Risk is a good one too.
But yeah.
All right, Offensive Player of the Year. We made sure that these were non-quarterbacks. Sometimes this goes to the quarterback as well that wins MVP, but we made non-quarterbacks for this decision. Who'd you have?
I went Derrick Henry. Again, if you compare Derrick Henry
DH2K
to the rest of his position, 470 more yards than anyone else rushing the football this year. And then there was like 800 more yards than number 3. 2,000 yards. Now it was kind of like they were kind of pumping him up at the end of the year to get him that 2,000 yards, but still they pumped him up every week. Like he was right. They rode him to the ground. Even when they were down by like 15 in the 4th quarter, they were still giving him handoffs. So yeah, Derrick Henry.
Your mom's ridden me to the ground a couple times. But no, DH2K doesn't have as good of a nickname than CJ2K, but it was a really impressive performance this year. And, they were stacking the box against this guy, and you just couldn't stop him. I mean, he has, I think he finished as the highest graded running back in the NFL as well, right ahead of Jonathan Taylor towards late in the season, which is cool. But I do think Derrick Henry, I like that for Offensive Player of the Year. I went Travis Kelce, the second highest graded player in the NFL this year. He was leading the NFL in receiving yards for a little bit. I think towards the end, he got passed up by some actual wide receivers, Stephon Diggs. But he was incredible this year. I think everyone in Kansas City looks at Patrick Mahomes, and then Andy Reid, and then maybe Tyreek Hill, and then they remember that Travis Kelce is the best tight end in the NFL. And I'm not sure why he wasn't more in the conversation. Maybe he was, and I just wasn't listening. But I think Travis Kelce, Offensive Player of the Year, absolutely. He has been outstanding this season. Did you hear this stat? Okay, this is going to blow your mind if you haven't heard this.
Okay.
Rob Gronkowski and Travis Kelce are the same age.
Holy shit.
They're only separated by a few months.
I did not know that.
And Travis Kelce is putting it in.
Yeah.
Playing out of his mind. And Rob Gronkowski has played well as well late in the season. But like Travis Kelce still looks like prime time Travis Kelce and is at the same age as Rob Gronkowski. I found that stat. I mean, it's not a stat. I mean, fucking fact. It blew my mind.
All right, here's some trivia that will probably also blow your mind. You know who is third? So Travis Kelce led all tight ends with 1,460 yards. Do you know who was third and how many yards they had in receiving yards at tight end?
I think Darren Waller was probably second.
Yeah, Darren Waller definitely second. 1,196. So he was close.
Give me a second here. Oh, it's Logan Thomas with like 690?
Nope.
Who was it?
TJ Hawkinson.
Really?
He's third among tight ends. 723, though. So almost half as many yards as
That's
Travis
absurd.
Kelce. And fourth was actually Mike Gesicki, 703, less than half as many yards.
So Logan Thomas isn't up there? Where is he, 5, 6?
I mean, he was 670.
But he had a ton of targets. I mean, he had over 100 targets this year, which is absolutely absurd. All right, Defensive Player of the Year, your choice.
Defensive Player of the Year, it's Aaron Donald. It's Aaron Donald.
It's been Aaron Donald for a few years now, and it's Aaron Donald again. He's the highest graded defensive player in the NFL, right ahead of Khalil Mack. He's not going to win, though. If you're placing bets on defensive player of the year, I guarantee you he's not going to win. It's going to go to a guy with better box score production. TJ Watt, Xavier Howard are two names that come to mind.
Yeah, I will say, I think Xavier Howard, Jalen Ramsey, Jair Alexander all had awesome seasons at the cornerback position and should deserve. I would love to give them some recognition, but as long as Aaron Donald exists, man, he is every single game, every single play changes what you have to do. No one else.
I also picked Aaron Donald as well for Defensive Player of the Year. But if you're looking to see who's going to actually win, I do think Xavier Howard or TJ Watt is probably going to be the guys, right?
I bet TJ Watt, but yeah.
Yeah, TJ Watt's probably going to be the guy. But I think Jalen Ramsey, too, you tweeted out that stat that blew up kind of, I think, over 10,000 likes. Hello. Flex on him.
14,000 at this point.
Allowed 20 yards per game. Yeah. He also led the NFL in yards allowed per coverage snap, which I think is it's not stable. Coverage play is not very stable, but I think very representative of how a cornerback is playing because it also is factoring in plays where they're not targeted and all those things. So I do think that he has been really, really impressive this year. All right, Coach of the Year, your pick for Coach of the Year.
It's going to be Kevin Stefanski, but I push back on that because this is what everyone thought they'd look like last year. Like everyone thought that was this team. Like that was expectations for them. And he did a lot of good things. Like he's very good. I'm not going to really blow back against any Kevin Stefanski. But Andy Reid, they went 14-1 in a loaded AFC against a lot of good teams. One loss, obviously, to the Raiders. And he did like a lot of the sort of quote-unquote analytics things that you love to see in terms of early down passing, going for it on fourth down when he should. Andy Reid was doing. Like he knocked it out the park, and they were the best team in the NFL. Yeah, you have Patrick Mahomes, but it's far from a complete roster. They were decimated by injuries along their offensive line and still ran the table in the AFC. I think it's Andy Reid.
I like Andy Reid.
And he's not going to get love because that was expectations.
But. Yeah. He won't win because the expectations were that Andy Reid was going to win, but I do like
Was
Andy.
That, yeah, like he just is so good. Everyone knows he's so good. Yeah.
I think Kevin Stefanski ends up pulling it down. If Brian Flores didn't lay an egg in Week 17, I think he wins it. I mean, what he had to overcome in Miami, front office pushing him to start Tua Tagovailoa after the bye, even though you could tell that he wanted to keep Ryan Fitzpatrick in, and he did in subsequent games, benching Tua to bring Fitzpatrick in to win some football games down the stretch. What he did with that defense, they don't have a single pass rusher that is outperforming, that is playing at a starter level. Andrew Van Ginkel, I think, is their best pass rusher, and even he doesn't have a top 10, top 20 pass rush win rate, but still managed to create pressure and win on defense. I think Brian Flores, if he didn't lay that egg, or the Miami Dolphins, rather, didn't lay that egg in Week 17, he'd be the guy over Stefanski. My pick, though, is freaking Ron Rivera. Talk about overcome literal cancer and a somewhat cancerous culture in Washington with Dwayne Haskins really struggling on and off the field. Really struggling. Really
overcoming cancer and a cancerous.
Yeah, that was not great. Regardless, off the field, Ron Rivera has been an absolute stud. And then in that organization, they literally changed their name this offseason.
Yeah, overcame the name change.
Dan Snyder has sexual assault allegations. Dwayne Haskins is partying with strippers maskless. Like, he has gone through everything and then some. Is in the postseason. Alex Smith is starting for them.
They're 7-9, though.
They're 7-9. I get it.
Okay.
Well, they shouldn't be 7-9. They were one of the favorites to finish with the most losses in the NFL.
The Eagles should have tried in Week 17. Is that your take?
No, I'm not.
Okay, they should. Yeah, no. Everyone picked him to be way worse. Yes,
they picked him to be way worse. He overcame cancer. Overcame a ton of bad things in Washington. I think Ron Rivera is
Dwayne
well
Haskins
deserving.
Didn't overcome a ton of ass.
No, but I think Ron Rivera is well deserving of that. I mean, they have a top 5 defense in the NFL, I believe, in EPA per play allowed.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, he did. He made magic with that defense. He's a very good defensive mind for sure. I'm not gonna like he did a very good job. They went 7-9. It's all the same.
Yeah, whatever, man. Whatever. You try doing better than 7-9 with the Washington football team.
I'm not coach of the year. I'm not trying to be coach of the year.
When you're forced to start Dwayne Haskins to start the season, and then Alex Smith, and then Alex Smith gets hurt, they start who? Kyle Allen? Taylor Heineke played football for this team, and they're in the playoffs. That, again, is feat that he's overcome feats that no man should ever have to.
Yeah.
But let's go ahead and give me your pick for exec of the year.
This one, I don't think, I don't think there's much of a conversation here. I think Brandon Beane, the job he did in the AFC, and everyone focuses, I feel like the draft gets glorified for in terms of like how performance evaluating a GM. What he's done in free agency has been better than anyone else in the NFL in terms of what they've done in free agency. He completely revamped their offensive line in free agency, their receiving core in free agency and trades, and their defense from kind of the start of his tenure. He has like revamped it. A lot of their biggest impact players he got from other teams and didn't have to pay that much to get them. That to me is impressive because everyone could have signed those guys. Anyone could have had Jordan Poyer or Micah Hyde at safety. Anyone could have gone out and got Cole Beasley and realized that he's one of the best slot receivers in the NFL. Gotten John Brown. Brandon Beane got them. And they're playing exceptionally well for him. I think he deserves it.
Absolutely. He's my pick as well. I mean, he made Mitch Morse, I think the highest paid center in the NFL that year was what it was. I think he's been passed up by then, but he's the starting center. Added John Feliciano, who's a backup in Oakland at the time and has now contributed as a starter for that team. Cole Beasley. And in subsequent years, added Stephon Diggs.
John Brown too, but Brown was hurt this year. But yeah.
I mean, he's been really, really impressive with the decisions he's made. And when you hit on that many decisions, including obviously Josh Allen, I mean, that's well deserving of Executive of the Year. You've said this before, I think, that it should be like a 3-year award, right? Where you look at, it should be like maybe there should be an exec of the 3 years. Is that a thing?
That's what it should be to evaluate, not just like, why is his name blanking on me? The Colts GM who drafted Andrew Luck.
Ballard.
No.
Oh.
Grigson. You're Ryan Grigson. You drafted Andrew Luck. Here's your award. Everyone drafts Andrew. Like you make obvious decisions, or you go out and spend $1 zillion one offseason to improve your team. Of course, you're going to be better that year. But is that sustainable? Like what Brandon Beane's done, is that sustainable over a number of years? I think we've seen that it has been from him. All
right, let's jump to now our kind of joke awards, but kind of the opposite end of the spectrum awards. I think these will be fun. Try not to be too damaging on these guys, but your least valuable player this year.
Yeah, I mean, we touched on him already. It's Dwayne Haskins. And the reason why when I was at the beginning of this year when he was benched, I was like, why are you benching him? It's because he was not that bad last year. Like he was not disastrously, unplayably bad. And through like a couple weeks, really wasn't either this year. But then I think you saw when he had to come back that he was just not, like there was not only not improvement, he was worse this year than he was in 2019. Just no positive reasons whatsoever. Something like obviously was not putting in the work off the field is why he got benched in the first place, and deservedly cut. Like he was atrocious at the quarterback position this year. 47.5 overall grade. More picks than touchdowns in a year where everyone was lighting up scoreboards.
Lowest graded passers on non-play action passes this year were Drew Lock, Mitch Trubisky, Sam Darnold, Nick Mullins, and last place was Dwayne Haskins. And I do think that I agree with you. I have him as my least valuable player, but I think it's more than that. I do think it's the off the field. Because when he was benched at first,
and
I thought
bad cultural value too.
Because when he was benched originally, he was not benched to second string, he was benched to third string, which I think was important, and for reasons that we found out down the road. But you saw reports after that. Some of it was because he was bragging in the locker room about throwing for over 300 yards in a game. And then you see that he's not. And then there was another report that came out that said he's not looking, he's not studying enough and not looking at, not studying film enough or whatever it may be.
Imagine bragging in the locker room about throwing for 300 yards.
So, and some of that has been reported, and some of that is just like kind of sprinkled rumors, whatever it may be. But regardless, I think we've seen more than enough to see that he's made bad decisions off the field. What those were, we know some of them, maskless stripper party, whatever that was. But then others, I think, were just not putting football first, or at least a high second behind your family and friends. Not
putting his team at risk.
The strippers were second, actually. I think the strippers might have been second. But regardless, least valuable player. And I think, again, I hate to freaking dog on a guy as young as Dwayne Haskins. Dwayne Haskins, I think, is in a good position to reset. You got, people talk about hitting rock bottom and then being able to bounce back. Like, it doesn't get lower than this. You got to bounce back. I think this is it's not rock bottom. I mean, the dude's made hundreds of thousands of dollars in his NFL career.
Yeah.
But I do think this is an opportunity for him to reset as that cut player, to try and come back and prove that he can come back into the NFL and play.
I was going to say, they did him a favor by cutting him. That is probably the best thing that could happen for him at that point. If they just let him hang on and keep going about his business and, like I said, as being the third string quarterback, I don't think much would change. But now It either has to change or else he's not going to have a job in the NFL. So
it's gonna be a tough road to come back into the NFL, but it's one that he has to do. He has to reset. All right, worst offensive player this year.
You doing all right over there? Take a sip of your Coors Edge.
I'm back.
That sounded awful, by the way.
It's not good.
That was okay. Call it the worst offensive player of the year. I will go with staying on the Washington football team.
Oh man,
maybe Ron
See,
Rivera
again,
was.
This is why Ron Rivera is.
But no, this is why you probably shouldn't be, because he gave Peyton Barber 94 carries instead of giving those to Antonio Gibson. Now some of those were obviously when Antonio Gibson was hurt, but on 94 carries, he averaged 2.7 yards per carry, only broke 7 tackles. If you had given Peyton Barber Derrick Henry's workload, 378 carries, he still would not have broken as many tackles as Antonio Gibson, who only had 170 carries.
That's
Antonio
awful.
Gibson, 37 broken tackles in the year on 170 carries. That's not good.
I also picked a running back for worst offensive player of the year, and it's Todd Gurley, the second lowest graded running back among all running backs with at least 100 carries this year, just ahead of Benny Snell of the Pittsburgh Steelers. Averaged under 0.17 forced missed tackles per touch, only 3.5 yards per carry. Really struggled to be that home run hitter for that team. Like, they were better handing the ball off to other players in that backfield. Specifically, Brian, who's the former Wyoming back they have there? Fuck, I'm missing it.
Brian Hill.
Brian Hill.
Former Bengal great.
I do think Brian Hill was the better back, obviously. Todd Gurley, worst offensive player this year, in my opinion. I think that's what I'll stick with.
I'd say he's like washed up, but this is what he looked like in 2016 also. So I don't know.
Wow. Bold take.
I mean, he did. That's like he averaged 3.2. He had a worse year that year, 3.2 yards per carry back.
He was just getting
everyone
fed.
said Jeff Fisher, but like I do think there are some things about the position. Like I never thought, even when things were going great, I think it was because of that offensive line. He had never had a running grade above 80 for us. I don't know.
I mean, we've always been like on the opposite end of the Gurley hype. You know, I mean, coming out of college, I really liked him. He was awesome at Georgia, but still, he's like very quickly declined. Some of that is because of the injuries in his knees, but like very quickly lost that speed. Like, you've seen him try and get to the outside in the NFL right now. It is hard to watch with Todd Gurley. I mean, we had this conversation recently, like, there's so many good running backs in the NFL. It's why the position is largely replaceable. But if you had to pick a guy that starts for a team that was the worst running back in the NFL, I'd be hard-pressed to find a better name than Todd Gurley. Maybe Frank Gore. Maybe you pick Frank Gore.
Frank Gore.
Definitely Frank Gore?
Yeah.
But either way. But Frank Gore, you can't put a price tag on the freaking leadership he brings to the locker.
He has buy-in. God damn it, Mike.
All right. Worst defensive player this year. Biggest liability, I think, is a good way to talk about it.
All right. I'm going to go with Lions linebacker Jelani Tavai. And if you followed any of our draft coverage that year, not the most surprising pick here. He, for a full season, only had 17 defensive stops. We're talking about Cam Curl having 37, Jeremy Chin having 30. Those are safeties. This guy plays closer to the ball, should theoretically have more stops. 17 defensive stops. A passer rating of 140 allowed in his coverage. Didn't touch a single football all season long in terms of
picks, no PBUs,
pass breakup, and had a 32.1 overall grade. So
tough scene for Jelani Tavai this year.
Second round pick. Yeah.
My pick is Jonathan Abram, the lowest graded safety in the NFL. Plays for the Las Vegas Raiders. A ton of missed tackles, a ton of blown coverages, a ton of explosive plays, loud nose coverage. I think he's going to get better. He has to. But I think the issue with Jonathan Abram right now is he freelances too much and plays too aggressive for a second-year player. And he didn't even play most of last season. He was injured.
Yep.
So he's very raw, very green in the NFL. But I think making decisions like he is Charles Woodson, who the number he wears in Las Vegas. Like, he's making decisions like very veteran-savvy decisions where, like, you wouldn't want to freelance and take those risks unless you were really confident in the decisions you're making. Like, they were playing, Tampa 2 on...
it's the Broncos.
Yeah,
he lets, so he's supposed to be the seam runner. He's supposed to be like the middle linebacker role in Tampa 2 where you run it out in the middle of the field and lets a post go by him and then lets a dig go by him and is sitting at the sticks.
He ends up going further than the underneath coverage players, the underneath zones. Like, he gets closer to the line of scrimmage than the guys playing closer to the line of scrimmage. And that, again, is just freelancing too much.
I like how he put it. Like, he plays like he's supposed to be this instinctive player, but actually doesn't have instinct. Like
he's aggressive.
He's taking like these chances where he's not actually has no clue what he's looking at that he's seeing. Like he's getting fooled.
He's aggressive and he's confident, and you do need that in a safety. But if you're aggressive and confident and just swinging at balls in the dirt, you know what I mean?
He hasn't seen a curveball that he didn't want to just knock out.
He wants to rip every curve thrown his way, and they're throwing curves at him, and they're picking on him. It's going to get better for Jonathan Abram. I think it needs to get better for Jonathan Abram. But when you're playing safety, you can't take the risks he's taking and freelance as often as he does if you want to grade well and not give up big plays.
I would just put him at linebacker at this point.
That's not a bad take. Add some beef to him.
There's no reason for him to play deep. Like he's just not that kind of playmaker at all. And he wasn't coming out of like Mississippi State. That wasn't his game either.
I mean, the comp was like Keanu Neal, but Keanu Neal is a bit more instinctive and takes less risks, and has actually played a lot better for.
He was at his best when he was playing exclusively box under Dan Quinn, like in that cover three.
I think you should see some more box. Jonathan Abram. All right, coach, opposite of coach of the year. So worst coach this season. Go ahead.
Adam Gase. I mean, he gave Frank Gore 187 carries.
Oh my God, that number is insane.
36-year-old Frank Gore, more than Antonio Gibson got this year, and he gave him 21 carries in a game they lost 31-13, which I don't know how that's possible in this day and age. I don't know. It's just that right there. They could have won like 5 games after that. That wrapped up this award for him, in my opinion.
187 carries is absolutely absurd for Frank Gore. Like they made him a legitimate bell cow.
Yeah.
And they were losing most football games like in the first quarter.
Yes. Like they should have been the pass happiest team in the NFL because they were down in every game. But they were the run heaviest.
My pick, and the reason I didn't go Adam Gase is because the expectations for the Jets were low already.
Okay,
you know what I mean? I think another coach in there probably gets them better, but I don't think too much better. Matt Patricia, there were people talking about Matt Stafford coming back healthy and getting them into the postseason. The worst defense in the NFL this year, EPA per play, Detroit Lions. And I know he was fired, and some of that's on the next coach coming in, but at a certain point, there wasn't enough instilled in that Detroit Lions team for that defense to even be a top 15, top 20 unit. Mm-hmm. And Matt Patricia really underwhelmed there, being a defensive-minded coach. You know what he didn't have, Quinn? Buy-in.
Oh, buy-in. Yeah, sorry. No, I'm asleep at the wheel. I was asleep at the wheel.
I mean, we've talked to multiple former Detroit Lions players about Matt Patricia and have heard things where, regardless of, we won't get into specifics, they didn't have buy-in. And from a performance perspective.
That is a weird thing. Usually when you're a polarizing coach, like you can have guys will come out and say negative things. That happens all the time. But then you'll have guys come out and defend, say good things. That didn't happen a lot with Matt Patricia.
I mean, it was bad. It was bad. There's a lot of reports beyond the conversations we've had about Matt Patricia and how he didn't have buy-in, but also purely from a numbers standpoint, that defense was the worst in the NFL this year. And he's supposed to be this guy that could turn that thing around, and he really didn't. Poor look for Matt Patricia. All right, worst executive of the year. And this one's tough, too, because I really like Bill O'Brien as a coach, but you have to pick Bill O'Brien as the worst exec this season.
It has to be. The Tunsil trade, 2 first and a second-round pick to make the guy far and away the highest-paid left tackle. It just skews everything we know about pass protection in terms of how valuable that elite guy is compared to how valuable just quality, competent play at left tackle is. There's not 2 first and a second round pick a difference and $24 million to pay that guy a year. That was absurd. Trading a third for Duke Johnson to never give him any touches was absurd when you can only get a third back for Jadeveon Clowney, only the second round, only getting a second for DeAndre Hopkins.
And David Johnson. You always forget to bring up David.
Getting David Johnson, which you didn't even need. You had a third for Duke Johnson. All these moves just screwing themselves cap-wise. A second for Brandon Cooks. Now, Brandon Cooks played well, but again, you're giving up a second to pay a guy $10+ million a year. Like you're just kind of a kid in a candy store buying whatever looks the tastiest to you and not caring about how much it costs. Mm-hmm. That was Bill O'Brien, GM.
And you can't make those short-sighted, expensive decisions as a GM or executive.
Yes.
Short-sighted, expensive decisions get you in cap hell. And guess where the Texans are now? Yeah. Absolute cap hell. And they're in a tough spot. We talked about it on the Monday episode about whoever this GM comes in. I guess it's going to be Nick Caserio.
So there's only 2 guys that the Texans can cut and save $10+ million cap space.
Who?
One's Brandon Cooks, your best receiver this year. One's J.J. Watt. your best defensive player this year.
Oh man, I didn't know that.
That's the only two guys they can cut. Now they can save some elsewhere with like $5 or $6 million deals, but they'd have to cut like a bunch of guys to do.
And I bet you, a lot of those contracts, how they were put together, like you're still probably taking on some dead money with these cuts here.
Oh yeah,
man, it's gonna be an interesting offseason for Nick Caserio. He's entering a situation where there's just literally like just fire. There's fire in the building. He's the "this is fine" meme right now, where like he's in there trying to put out a ton of flames.
I will say though, so we kind of hated on the GM job there. If you can survive this wave, and if you can just, Caserio's obviously probably friends with Easterby, it's going to be a good gig for the next decade after that. It's just going to suck for the next couple of years.
Yeah. Well, because you have Deshaun Watson.
Yeah, that's all you worry about is if like the expectations are to immediately bounce back from ownership, or I guess in this case, Jack Easterby, you might be screwed. You might be out of a job in a year. That's what we worried about when we were ranking those GM jobs. But if that's not the case, if you're best friends with this guy and you're set for the next 4 or 5 years, then it's going to be a pretty cushy job after that, I'd say.
That's going to do it for the Wednesday episode of 2-for-1 Drafts. The Friday episode, we're actually recording Thursday. It'll come out Thursday night, I believe. The Thursday-Friday episode is going to be a mailbag episode. And to make sure your question is guaranteed answered, rate, review, and subscribe to the 2-for-1 Drafts podcast and leave a question there. You leave a question on the reviews, I'll guarantee we answer it on that podcast if it shows up on Apple Podcasts by the time we record. If you could also ask a question, we're probably going to tweet out some things saying mailbag, get your questions answered about the draft or whoever you want. Could be about non-alcoholic beers, whatever you need questions answered for. Mike has answers. He's the guy. I can also chip in as well. But that's going to do it for this week. Remember, rate, review, and subscribe. Until next time, Austin Gayle, Mike Renner, 2-for-1 Drafts.